Morning, and it's been a fascinating couple of days. Compared to all the organisations that we were looking at yesterday, which were essentially very light and nimble on their feet, a lot of our clients are massive organisations, and it takes a lot to sort of change them. My organisation is a strategy and insight consultancy. We employ 50 people. We work across the United States. We work in Scandinavia. We're based in the UK, and we also work in Australia and New Zealand. And we work for a wide range of organisations, all the big national museums and galleries in England, and large organisations in America as well, and Australia and New Zealand, and increasing numbers of national organisations in Denmark and Sweden. But many of them, as I said, we work for small organisations as well. We work for performing arts organisations, heritage and leisure organisations, but many of them are very large. And what we work to is to encourage organisations to be vision-led and audience-focused. So we're encouraging them to articulate really very strong, ambitious vision statements and work to a very strong cause or purpose, but always to keep the audience very central in their consideration. We use this model to describe different types of organisations. Often, for the curators that we're working for, the moment you start talking about audience focus, they jump into the bottom green box, which is audience-led, audience-focused. And by that we mean sort of mainstream commercial organisations that sort of are concentrating on reaching mainstream tastes by doing what the audience wants. We don't mean that at all. A lot of arts organisations, on the other hand, are vision-led or curatorially led or collections-led and peer-focused, where the audience really doesn't play much of a part at all. The organisation is quite introverted and focused on meeting the needs or the approval of their peers. There are plenty of organisations, and we saw quite a few of those yesterday, that are audience-led and socially focused, where the primary purpose of the organisation is community-based development, helping people fulfil their potential, where the artistic vision is actually directly related to a particular target audience. But what we're talking about is vision-led, audience-focused, where an organisation has a strong and ambitious vision, but it wants to get that vision out to as wide an audience as possible. Over the years, we've worked in lots of organisations. We've been working for over 30 years in the cultural sector, and we started looking at the beginning of this century at what a 21st century museum needed to look like. And these are the characteristics that we identified. As well as being vision-led, modern museums are brand-driven very often. The brand is very central. The clear purpose, personality, and values of the organisation are very clearly communicated. A vision-led, audience-focused museum is essentially interdisciplinary. It works cross-departmentally rather than in silos. Outcome-orientated. The museum is very clear on the impact it wants to make, the difference it wants to make to people, and it measures its effectiveness through measuring outcomes. Insight-guided. Data, and audience insight is seen as the lifeblood of the organisation. Interactively engaged, not just a two-way conversation with visitors, but interactively engaged in the community with partnerships. And personalised, the organisation wants to help visitors achieve their own needs and construct sort of personal meaning. Museums also inform. We're a place for learning. We're a benevolent educator, and we'll help you make connections between what you know already and what we have in our collection. From about the 1990s onwards, museums started involving people. interactive displays, interactivity. Museums will inspire curiosity and fire the imagination. And many museums did this, but science museums and science centres tended to lead the way in that. But looking forward, museums increasingly are having expectations of them that they will help, there will be an act of co-creation and co-curation, shared experiences rooted in community activity very often. Museums working in partnership with people, where the public's ideas are as important as the museums. And then moving on, museums being seen as places for forums for debate, places to explore ideas, and a much more sort of interactive, two-way, community-based area of activity. And when you look across the whole spectrum, then museums are not sort of necessarily going to have to move from the left to the right, but they might be playing across a much wider spectrum than they do at the moment. So educational activity might move over towards the right, community events might move over towards the right, but this sort of left-hand side of the model is still very much in play, because without it, we wouldn't have museums. But also the museum might decide where to locate its brand along this spectrum. I'll skip these. These are some statements of manifestos that reflect this sort of changing model of a museum. I'll just very quickly explain how we've used data in a museum very much in the delivery mode. Art Institute Chicago, a very traditional museum, only just opening its doors to audience focus when we worked on this study. They had a new modern wing built, a Renzo piano building. The architects assumed it would be a completely intuitive building, so they didn't want to put any signage up. I'll do it very quickly. Inside the modern wing was the modern collection, the modern 20th century art collection. And the curator was somewhat similar to the architect, felt that the collection was intuitive and didn't need any labels. So we looked at what was going on. Not enough people were going into the modern wing, or if they were going into it, they were just walking all the way through it, and not enough people were going into the modern galleries. The architects assumed that people would go up in the lift, turn left, go in the entrance door, walk around the collection in chronological order and come out of the exit door. We did observations, vox pops, surveys, and what we found is that people were going up the stairs, turning left, going in the exit door, going around the modern collection in reverse chronological order, and not learning anything. So this shows that people who were motivated by emotional and spiritual motivations were not getting what they were looking for. And a lot of people who were going with those motivations were coming out just having seen a bit of art, but not having gained any benefit from it. We put up signs, much to the sort of building police's disdain. We put up orientation guidance. That didn't really work. And so we put up more clear signs. We put up a big sign on the exit saying exit, a big sign on the entrance saying entrance, and we also put a timeline of 20th century art in along the corridor, and more labels and wall panels in the galleries. And as a result, 60% of people went into the galleries by the right door, and what they were getting was a more engaging experience. This is a model that we use to study sort of behavior in galleries. And whereas before the interventions, there were a lot of people just walking around the galleries in a fairly vague, unengaged way, which we call orientation, there were quite a few people just sort of moving from one piece of work to another without really looking at the work. But by phase 2, we had fewer people behaving like that in the galleries and more people in what we call the discovery and the immersion mode, which is where they're actually looking at the artwork, reading the interpretation, re-looking at the artwork, discussing it with their friends, and engaging with it much more deeply. So that's just an example of where we apply the sort of use of data to designing a better quality of visit experience. I've got a few more, but I've run out of time.